Hey there everyone, my name's Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Let's continue building the 650 scale Enterprise D projects. Welcome back to update number 8 on the 650 scale Enterprise D projects. You might be saying, Andrew, why are you taking so long? Uncle Lou and Philly, they are already done. Their big Enterprise D projects. What's taking you so long? Well, you are right. They've just wrapped up their builds. They look great, but I'm doing this at a little bit of a slower pace. Between the day job and kids, it is hard to squeeze in the time to get these things built. And I have a different deadline than what Phil and Lou have. You see, my deadline is Wonderfest, and we have 178 days left to get the projects done. This will be on display, or at least one of them will be on display at Wonderfest. That is the deadline. That is my goal. So what do we have left to do on the projects? Well, we've got an awful lot left to do, but I can tell you right now, every single window is finally masked. Boy, did that ever take a long time to get all those windows, thousands of windows on these projects masked up. They're all done. So here is the outline of what's coming up next. First, we're going to plan out the lighting. The lighting that we're using is going to be from Inner Lighting Effects, and because of the way that is set up, and there are 2 data channels we're going to be running through the ship, I have to plan out exactly how that is going to work its way through the models. Next up, we're going to be installing the lighting and building the ship from the bottom up. Thirdly, we're going to be doing seam work and primer. Then we're going to move on to light blocking. We want to make sure that every square inch of this thing is light blocked properly, which is one reason why we are painting this after it is assembled. Then we're going to do primer touch-up and prep for the base coat. Once that's all done and we're happy with it, we are going to move on to the base coat. Then we're going to do the Aztec paint. Then we're going to either do decal or paint details on the ship. I haven't decided which one yet. There are some great decals available from Cosmic Scale Models, so I may check those out, or I may just make my own masks and paint those. We'll see. That's yet to be determined. And then finally, after all that's done, we just have to do the final details and make the base for the one that's going to Wonderfest. So let's get right at it. But before we get started, why not take a moment and click the subscribe button? And while you're here, click on that notification bell so you don't miss a single update. If you're considering purchasing a Tesla, you could save money by using my referral link, which is located in the description below. So just before we get the lighting sorted, there is something else I need to take care of, and that is the pylon parts for these Enterprise D projects. We have a potential issue, and I'm not sure if this is an actual issue, but it is a potential issue, and we have no way of knowing if this is going to be a problem or not until the kit is fully constructed and has been sitting for an extended period of time. That is, will the resin part support the weight of the nacelles over the long term? And that is a question that we cannot answer, and since we cannot answer that, I'm going to assume the answer is no. However, we don't want any pylon droopage, so what I've decided to do is to take the pylon part and put steel strip inside the pylons. So in order to do that, we need to create space for the metal strip to go into. We also need to shape this so that it goes around the curve. And here's that work done. Now, this took a long time to do. It was very, very tedious work to do. The entire section that will house the steel strip has been taken out. I did get a little bit too close to the surface underside there over on this side, and I did come through here. That's no problem. That'll get resealed up with a little bit of putty once this is all done. I've also formed the shape of the steel plate, and that was done by forming it around this wood block. This wood block has been shaped specifically to match the curves of the pylon. So this gives me a good solid base from which to create the curves here. So this metal steel strip sits in here. It'll get secured down and epoxied into place. Then the steel strip that comes off of the armature will butt up against this. And I could mate them together, but I don't know that that's going to be necessary because the pylons are going to be really well secured to the rest of the ship. So we shouldn't have to create a physical connection between this metal and the metal in the armature. We can if we want to, and if I feel that that's going to be necessary, I will do that. But we will jump off that bridge when we get to it. You see that I've marked some lines on here. That's because no matter how much I clean out of the actual pylon piece, I can't quite get it to sit flush with the surface here. So the area inside this line going up the curve, I'm going to have to grind down a little bit because the entire metal strip has to sit flush or under the surface of the pylons in order for it to look right when it's all done. Now we will have the blowaway covers that will go on this section, which will hide a multitude of sins when it comes to puttying this up and getting it to look good. Also, your wiring will go along here up the front, in front of the steel piece here, in the existing channel that was there. But I want to make sure that this sits under the surface, so I've gone through and I've seen which areas sit proud, and it's the leading edge leading into the curve that sits proud. So I'm going to work on grinding this section down a little bit, just so that once I putty everything over, it will look nice and seamless, or look as good as we can get it. There's a possibility that I might also cover the surface of this part with some strip styrene when it's all said and done, and that will just continue to help blend it all in and make it look really sharp, really smooth to get this metal piece in. But again, we will jump over that bridge when we get to it. Let's get this part here on both sides ground down. Also, this is clearly too long because the nacelles are not that thick. I deliberately left extra on the end of each one to help me form that curve. The more of the metal strip I have above the curve, the easier it was for me to make that curve. So the line here is about where that will get cut off. That'll allow it to go just into the nacelle a little bit and help with securing the nacelle to the pylons. So here's the metal piece. It's been processed. It's been ground down quite a bit here in the corners. It's still structurally sound, and I have given it a good coat of red oxide paint to seal it in. It is taking a little bit of time to cure up, but it is ready now to go into the pylon section. So the next time you see this part, it should be clamped in place, epoxied in place, and set up to cure. Just popping in real quick, I have a friend who's a model building content creator here on YouTube who just hit 500 subs on his channel in a live stream just a little while ago, but I think we can do better than that. His name is Jordan and his channel is Aligning the Stars. He does Star Trek and Star Wars stuff very similar to what we do here, so if you want more content in this genre, go check him out, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button, and if you do, make sure you say Canadian Starship sent you. Going handheld here for a moment so I can kind of work my way around the various clamps here, but here is the metal piece, the steel piece, now epoxied down into the pylons, and it's been epoxied in place, and I've got lots of clamps on it, and this will get left for quite some time to make sure that the 5-minute epoxy has a lot of time to really set up. I want to make sure that this is fully secured down into the pylon section here so that it will not release. Now, this area in the back will get more epoxy as the metal piece, the steel piece that's attached to the metal armature will come right up to this piece here. And all of that will get epoxied really securely down to the pylon, and of course the top piece of the secondary hull goes over top of that. So this is going to be really well secured down into place, and this steel strip will just make sure that there is absolutely zero chance of any pylon sag over the long term with this model. So here we are with the two sets of pylons. Now this is the second of the two pylons. This one over here with all the clamps on it is the one that you previously saw. I had some issues with this one. I had it clamped down for 24 hours and I thought that was going to be enough for all the epoxy to cure, but clearly it was not. What seems to happen is that when the pressure on the clamps was released, the epoxy may not have been fully cured. The metal piece raised up a little bit and then the epoxy underneath cured, creating quite a gap. So I had to pull this one off completely, scrape off all of the epoxy, and I've put it down. You'll notice that it's a bit of a different item that I've used to secure it down. On this one, I went with the JB Weld Quick Weld product, which has some metal components inside of it. This one was done with the regular epoxy, and I kept this one clamped down under pressure for 4 full days, and that seems to have done it as far as making sure that the epoxy underneath is fully cured. So I'm going to allow this one to sit for at least another day, if not a bit more, under the pressure of the clamps, but we can get started getting some lighting into the pylons on this particular unit. So what we need to do next is work on the lighting for the tail fin here. Now, typically what most modelers will do is they will put a red one in the end here, a green one in the end here, and call it a day. However, the way that the model is actually done, the studio models are done, there's a red top and bottom right on the very edge, and same with the greens here. So there's actually 2, and they're right on the very edge. Very difficult to get in and to look right, but we're going to do our very best to make sure that we reproduce that look properly. So I'm going to pan the camera over here, and you can tell that I've got a bunch of 0402 SMDs on their 24-hour burn-in test. Now I've got 10 green and 10 red. That's going to do all of the red and green that we need for the entirety of the 2 models. We've got 2 green for each one on the tail, 2 red for the tail. We've got 2 of each color in the saucer on the sides, and then on the neck we've got 1 of each. So that's a grand total of 5 per model, 10 overall. So that's what we've got going on here on the breadboard. They are doing their 24-hour test. If the LEDs survive the 24-hour test, then we know that they are good to go and there's no defects in the LEDs. The worst thing that could happen is that you don't run your LEDs for a good long test. You permanently install them, you get your whole model closed up, and then they burn out because there was a defect that you didn't test. So those are going in for the 24-hour test. I've probably got about 4 or 5 hours left on here that they need to sit for, but we're going to start working on creating the channel for these lights to go into. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of drilling. The second of the 2 pylons actually came with some channels already created in the print of the part. We'll need to create them on the first one, but I also want to make sure that these are in the location where I want them. We might need to do a little bit of adjustment work there. That's fine. But that's what we're going to be working on next as we're moving into the lighting and the construction phase. 0402 SMDs are installed in the end of the pylons. Now this was nowhere near as difficult as I thought it would be. It was definitely easier on the second of the 2 pylons versus the first of the 2, because the second edition had trenches already created here that the wires can go into. So I just drilled the holes top and bottom right on the edge as they appear on the studio model, and was able to feed the very thin wire through and get them hooked up. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to set this up so you can see on the camera, prop it up like this. I'm going to turn these on so you can see what they look like. There we go. Top and bottom, red and green lights. I'll move it around a little bit. There's the top. There's the bottom. Top and bottom. Just like it appears on the studio model. Now the temptation when you're modeling here is just to stick one in the end and call it done, but I did want that to appear the same way as it does on the studio model, and I'm really happy with the way that this has turned out. So I think the next step is going to be figuring out what wiring needs to go in this trench and installing the bottom section of the warp nacelles. All of the wires going to the nacelles are installed. Now I have secured them down temporarily with solar res. It's a really quick, easy way to get them secured down into the channel. And these channels and the surface of the metal support need to be filled in and covered and smoothed out. However, I just opened up my epoxy sculpt and it has all gone bad. One part is rock hard, the other is all tarnished and colored and discolored. So that's a good sign that all that's gone bad. So I've ordered some new stuff. It should be arriving tomorrow. For the time being, I'm going to start working on consolidating these wires down. So I've just got the one, apart from the greens, because they are the data, and they don't get it consolidated because it'll be data in, data out. But the rest of these can be consolidated down. That'll tidy things up. I also need to choose some colors for the constant on navigation lights. The flashing circuit's going to be white and blue, so I'm going to have to choose alternating colors for the constant ons, as they are also going to be controllable through the expansion board on the inner lighting system. So that's where we are at the moment. I'm going to get these consolidated down, and then once the epoxy sculpt comes in, I will start dealing with this, because I think I'm really going to need to deal with covering this up before I get the nacelles attached, because I'm going to need to be able to get into this area and make sure that's all smooth and everything like that. So that's going to be a lot easier right now before the nacelles get in. Once that's all done and it looks good, then I will start to work on getting the nacelles, or at least the bottom half of the nacelles, attached. I've got a couple things to bring you up to speed on here. The first is that I have consolidated these wires. I've joined them up, so the wires for power coming down from the nacelles into the pylon section have been joined together. Again, we're leaving the green separate because we've got data going up and then data coming back down. The next thing I want to show you is that I have a bunch of white 0402 SMDs wired up, resistored up, and they are on their 24-hour burn-in test. Now, I need 17 white LEDs per model. So 17 per Enterprise D. And there aren't even 17 here, and I need double that. So 34 altogether between the two. I have run out of the resistors that I need. So I have ordered those resistors. They should be arriving tomorrow. So I've gone ahead and wired up as many of them as I can so I can get them tested. So I've got some I can start to install, for example, in the back of the nacelles. And I am going to move on to some other stuff. Also, I pulled my epoxy sculpt out and it went bad. So I'm waiting today on some fresh epoxy sculpt to come so I can start to clean up the trenches and the metal plate going on to the pylon. So a bunch of stuff that's in motion and that I'm kind of just waiting on. So we've got these wires consolidated. I've got some LEDs running a test, and we're going to just wait for Amazon to deliver my epoxy sculpt so I can get working on the pylon. The epoxy sculpt has arrived. I've gone ahead and I've done the work. It was really, really messy work, so I wanted to keep that off camera. But I will walk you through what I did to get this done. So first, I took the epoxy sculpt, the two parts, and I pushed it in. I worked it into the area where the trench was covering the metal support. Make sure that if you're doing that, that you are wearing gloves. So I worked it in, smoothed it out as best that I could while it was still pliable, and then I let it cure. Then once it was cured, I used a utility blade to scrape it down. Nice thing about that is it does stretch fully across the section here, and so it keeps it fairly level going across there. That did about 99% of the work. Then after that, I used some very fine wet dry sandpaper and I wet sanded down the whole thing. That took several passes to get it smoothed out, but now to the look and like to the eye and to the touch, it is pretty much smooth and flush to the surface. There are some minor variations which I'm hoping that the filler primer is going to deal with. So I do also have these trenches for the lights, for the tail lights that need to be done. That's going to be a simple job compared to what this area here was. And then once this is filled in, smoothed out, sanded down, then the whole thing is going to get primer so that I can really see what the surface is going to be like. And it might take some work with sanding down that primer and a couple coats, but we'll see how that turns out. But that is a job for the next update video. And that's going to be everything for this update on the 650 scale Enterprise D projects. I am so excited that we are finally essentially done with the armature portion of this project. That has just eaten up so much of the time. There is a little bit of putty work still left to do on the pylons, but that means that we can move on to other things. So in the next update, we're going to start assembling this thing. We're going to work on getting the nacelles attached to the pylons. The pylons will then get attached to the lower secondary hull, and we will start building this thing up from the bottom up, getting some lighting installed. It is going to be awesome. I am looking forward to it, and fingers crossed, this thing should assemble fairly easily. It should not take too much time to get this whole thing assembled because, well, you know what? Time is ticking away. This thing needs to be done for Wonderfest. So I think that we are going to be in okay shape for that. But if you've enjoyed this update, make sure that you hit that like button if you're new to my channel, or you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button today. It'll make me very happy if you do. But for now, my name is Andrew, and this is Canadian Starships. Have a great day, everyone.